It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I'm so glad y'all here. I often would tell people that I was a card carrying member of the NRA, and they were very surprised. But when I was in junior ROTC, I was on the rifle squad, and I was pretty good in high school. And we joined the NRA, and I don't think they ever take you off the rolls. I grew up with a great grandmother who carried a gun in her duster pocket. My maternal grandmother. I grew up with my maternal great grandmother. My maternal grandmother carried a weapon. In fact, she's actually the only person. No, that's not true. She is my grandmother has shot someone within the last decade. She had told him not to come on her carport, and he did anyway. And she shot him. I think they took her gun after that. My mother used to carry her weapon. She always slept with it under her pillow. Um, and she had another one that she kept in her purse. If you picked up her purse while we were at church, you would wonder what in the world did this woman have, because her pistol was very, very heavy. And she always kind of thought that if there was ever a place uh, to to rob some people, it would be churches on Sunday morning during collection time. And our ushers were all women, and mostly. And she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be ready should the time come," which I always thought was interesting. And so I think that the lens I have around guns on an individual level is different than what people would think based on demographics, right? Like, you probably would think that I don't have weapons. I have several. Because on an individual level, I think, growing up or spending my summers in rural Mississippi, I mean, should something happen, I think people thought it was going to take a while for the police or the state trooper to get to Matson, Mississippi. Um, you have a gun for wild animals, all kinds of things. And yet, when you look at that, we have more guns than, with regular citizens than any other um, country in the world. When you evaluate that collectively, um, there's a certain demographic of the United States of America who tends to buy weapons and hoard guns and have thousands of pounds of artillery. When you take a look at the gun violence that is happening in urban centers, um, logically, you would a person would ask, what is the difference between us and those other countries? And Heather McGhee wrote a book called The Sum of Us: What Racism is Costing Everyone. And she tells this narrative of the canary in the coal mine. And she said the reason why you used to put the canary in the coal mine is because if there were not enough oxygen in there, um, the canary would die. And it was an indicator that the people wouldn't have enough oxygen to be able to live. And so the canary was a signal. And in this book, The Sum of Us, Heather McGhee walks down in almost every single major institution in this country: healthcare, banking and lending, criminal justice, um, education, how things tend to have affected the canaries first, and in this case, Black people, and then would then be an issue for the larger society. In the first half of the book, honey, it is quite depressing. And then in the second half of the book, it is full of solution, and not just theoretical solution. She has gone through to cities throughout the United States and found examples of people who were bringing folks together to really tackle institutional racism. And so, why do I bring that up today? Well, I know that we are all in this country together, and I believe with everything in me that the world just tends to work better if we can figure out how to get along. Um, I believe that at my core. And that is just not going to happen without intentional effort. And so while I am actively trying to get us to be more inclusive and more equitable and more just, I wrote this particular little piece of work because none of it's going to work if we don't have empathy. And about 13 years ago, a man named Daniel Beaty performed a poem called Knock Knock, and I'm going to end with it today. Um, and in that poem, he was kind of making a call to all of us to say, like, how are you going to show up and what are you going to do? And it is so easy to spit out narratives. I am the queen of being able to explain an idea simply. I love a good talking point. I know people were against me when I was like, man, that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She is exceptional at being able to say something plainly and over and over and over again, in a way that people will buy into it and then start to repeat it. Because here's the thing, my dear, it has been evidence-based and proven that if you say something with a firmness about you, a clarity about you, without hemming and hawing, that people will believe you are an expert and that you know what you're talking about. And if you say it enough times, people start to believe it and then say it back. And the thing that we often repeat and say over and over and over again is that guns don't kill people, people kill people. And to that, my question would be, why then would we keep giving guns to people who kill people? You see, if I have a propensity to murder, wouldn't you take my gun? That's just, if you just think logically about it without you thinking about somebody coming to take your personal weapons, or what you personally are collecting for, why would you continue to give weaponry to people who have demonstrated that they cannot be responsible with it? You see, if I'm not responsible with my car, I can't get insured and they won't let me continue to drive. If I'm not responsible with um, my home and how I'm using it, um, you probably, let's say I'm using it for nefarious acts like trafficking or anything that is harmful to the larger community, you gonna take it. You're gonna take my stuff from me. Um, and we have got to figure something out because what is happening in urban centers with Black people, because also every time I bring up gun violence, people want to say Black on Black crime. And, I'm tired of fighting it. All right, fine. Let's talk about it. The crime that is happening in our urban centers, a place I love to eat here in Kansas City, District Fish, the owner was murdered last week, shot in the morning, walking to work. Like, we have an issue. And I know nobody in Kansas City can bring up the likes of Chicago because we are higher on the list per capita in terms of violent cities than Chicago. That's not good for a place where we want to work and raise families and have a good time. And here's what people tend to think. They tend to think that my zip code is safer and your zip code is not. And so therefore I'm fine. Talk to any economist and they will tell you that violence is costing your us about $2,500 per resident on average here in the state of Missouri. You got 400 people at your company, that's $1 million that violence is costing you directly in your pocket. And so if I can't lean into the empathetic nature of humans, can we talk about just what it's costing us? And I saw a lot of people put up on social media this week, just I was one of them, arguing against what happened to Ralph Yarl and saying, well, dang, If a kid just shows up at your doorstep, like, just don't open your door. Or, um, I mean, you got a Ring camera, can't you just stay upstairs? Or if you gonna come, why would you do that? And then there's this other side of the argument where I know people who have said, "Well, the prosecutor is a good person." I've heard people say things like, "Well, why did his mother send him to pick up his siblings? Why was he there at 10 o'clock at night?" I've heard people say, "Why did he go to the wrong address?" And you see, that's part of the problem. You don't have to be a bad person to allow racist ideas and unconscious bias to cause you to not file charges. And so here's the example I'd like to use. If a dog was standing outside my door and I shot through my door at that dog and then shot the dog again, you tell me, how long would it take for me to be charged? People would consider me irresponsible with weapons. You know how I know that? We have so much evidence with the very public case of Michael Vick. So how can you understand and know that harming a dog is unacceptable, but you don't understand and know that harming a child is unacceptable? The person who asked the question about why was he picking up his siblings? Why did his mother allow him to pick up his siblings? Has siblings and knows that older children drive younger children around. It's victim blaming at best. It's a lack of humanity at worst. I even heard, "Oh, that poor man." You see, when you can look at a person and say, "Let me imagine that that's my grandfather," I think that's empathy. But then what you also have to do is reckon with the racist ideas of your grandfather, see? And that's what we don't like to do. When you consider that Black people with Black sounding names are less likely to get hired, when you consider when they remove the questions about felonies from applications, that Black people got called back for job interviews even less because folks just assumed that there was a criminal record. When you evaluate the fact that Black women, even when you control for wealth and education and weight and diet and all the things, are more likely to die in childbirth. When you consider that there are on record case after case after case after case of organizations being fined because they have charged Black people for no other reason than the color of their skin, exorbitant interest rates on things, loans, then don't you have to consider that if you know what your internal thoughts have been and your conversations have been at your dinner tables, that's nothing more or nothing less than a knock on your door. When you experience me as a consultant, after you have been given a referral, after you have seen trailers, after you have read testimonials and talked to references, and you still are not sure if I'm going to be good enough until you do a test run, is that really necessary? Or are there some racist ideas in there guiding it? I don't know. But what I will say is this, is that when we look outward and we say, "Oh, these monsters with these guns." What responsibility do we have to control the guns we have in terms of our pen in the banking and lending office, in terms of our keyboards in our recruiting office, in terms of our chair at the table at the executive level when we're deciding succession plans, in terms of our spots in the principal office when we are deciding who is getting suspended or not. What you doing with your gun? Because yes, there's a systemic problem that is happening here in this country. We have too many guns. I do not need an AR-15. For what? For what? I have one. Why? What military situation you think, like, what are we prepping for? And look at the stats at who has all of these guns. You see, I think the most dangerous place in the world is for me to be in the mind of someone who has some racist ideas. What you think, feel, and believe about me, you must ask yourself, do you know anything at all about Black people? Or are you making up these thoughts based on narratives that you've watched or read or heard about? I don't know. But I know for me, when Daniel Beaty did the knock knock um, poetry jam competition, I was moved. And so I hope you give me 2.5 minutes to also be moved, because I think it's worth the listen.
As a boy, I shared a game with my father. Played it every morning till I was 3. He would knock on my door and I'd pretend to be asleep till he got right next to the bed. Then I would get up and jump into his arms. Good morning, Papa. And my papa, he would tell me that he loved me. We shared a game, knock, knock, until that day when the knock never came. And my mama takes me on a ride past cornfields on this never-ending highway till we reach a place of high, rusty gates. A confused little boy, I enter the building carried in my mama's arms. Knock, knock. We reach a room of windows and brown faces. Behind one of the windows sits my father. I jump out of my mama's arms and run joyously towards my papa's, only to be confronted by this window. I knock, knock, trying to break through the glass, trying to get to my father. I knock, knock as my mama pulls me away before my papa even says a word. And for years, he has never said a word. And so 25 years later, I write these words for the little boy in me who still awaits his papa's knock. Papa, come home because I miss you. Miss you waking me up in the morning and telling me you love me. Papa, come home because there's things I don't know, and I thought maybe you could teach me how to shave, how to dribble a ball, how to talk to a lady, how to walk like a man. Papa, come home because I decided a while back I want to be just like you, but I'm forgetting who you are. And 25 years later, a little boy cries, and so I write these words and try to heal and try to father myself, and I dream up a father who says the words my father did not. Dear son, I'm sorry I never came home. For every lesson I failed to teach, hear these words. Shave in one direction with strong, deliberate strokes to avoid irritation. Dribble the page with the brilliance of your ballpoint pen. Walk like a god, and your goddess will come to you. No longer will I be there to knock on your door, so you must learn to knock for yourself. Knock, knock down doors of racism and poverty that I could not. Knock, knock on doors of opportunity for the lost brilliance of the Black men who crowd these cells. Knock, knock with diligence for the sake of your children. Knock, knock for me, for as long as you are free, these prison gates cannot contain my spirit. The best of me still lives in you. Knock, knock with the knowledge that you are my son, but you are not my choices. Yes, we are our father's sons and daughters, but we are not their choices. But despite their absences, we are still here, still alive, still breathing, with the power to change this world, one little boy and girl at a time. Knock, knock, who's there? We are.
When somebody knocks on your door, and wherever you have the power, just remember those words. Knock, knock, who's there? We are. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got work to do.